There we go. We're live. Hey, welcome everybody. Hope you're doing well. Happy Monday. Moving towards the end of July here. We got only a few more days left here as we wrap up July. Hopefully you're doing well. Hopefully you've had a great summer. Just had some opportunity to rest, opportunity to lean into some time with your family. I'm actually taking a little bit of time today, taking the kids. There's this really pretty sweet area here in central Texas called Blue Hole, and it's in Wimberley. It's like this river that kind of comes through. They have rope swings and stuff like that. So a little bit later today, that's what I'm heading to do, spend a little bit of time. So hopefully you're getting a little bit of time with your family, a little bit of downtime with ministry. So we're going to jump in today for just a few minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes here. We'll jump on doing another live. Super glad you're here. This has been something that we've been doing over the last several weeks as a way of just like, what does it look like for us to kind of reframe, reorient our week, head into with intentionality, thinking about what the things that God has called us to. Super excited. Had a chance to hear from some of you, some of the things that you're challenged, some of the calls that we've been on. It's been super fun to be a part of. So what we're going to do today is actually talk about something that we've been kind of circling around for the last few weeks. We've been talking about margin. That's really been our theme for July, in this kind of slow down pace and this kind of ministry pause season. We want to begin to kind of double down and continue the conversation today for just a few minutes. And so I know for a lot of us as leaders, this is a really hard conversation, not because we don't know we should do it, not because we don't know that it's valuable, but for some reason, there's things inside of us that when we're creating some of that space to slow down, we feel like that we're moving backwards, right? But for us as to be healthy leaders and to have healthy teams that we're leading, we need to understand the value of creating margin and creating some of that space. And so before we get into some of the how, in fact, just kind of a pause here. If you're watching this either live or the replay over the next couple of days on this Wednesday, the 22nd, July 22nd, we're going to be jumping on a live training, kind of putting all of these pieces together, just looking at what it looks like for us to create really healthy rhythms in leadership. And then also, how do we create intentionality around the times that we do have, the time that we do invest into making sure that we're maximizing that time and actually doing the things that we're called to do. So we're going to spend some time on Wednesday this week talking about that. But what I want to do today is not necessarily get into, or before we get into the how of doing some of these things, I want to kind of plant something underneath that I think it's important for us as leaders to remember. I want you to remember that none of this, of what we've been talking about over these last several weeks, is really around doing more or even like managing your team into a better pace. But it's more of like a kind of a, if you were to dig below some of those kind of core concepts, it's margin flows actually out of the ability to be reminded that we're already loved by the Lord, right? So that we don't have to, we're not trying to work harder, we're not trying to earn more, but we're working out of a sense of rest and how God already views us, so that we're not just creating margin for the sake of creating margin or to be better leaders, but really the sense of like, who is the Lord calling us to be? And so I just want to remind us of that today. I was being reminded of that even as I was looking at my calendar, my week, my schedule, of like, I'm not trying to be productive for productive sake, but I'm being like intentional because the Lord has loved me. I'm not trying to earn anything more, but I'm resting in the fact of how he sees me, of being a child, being loved by him. And so but I thought about even today is like, what's the tension that we live in as leaders, right? And so the tension, and I think it's a growth point for us as leaders to continue to think about, including myself. So I'm gonna just like bundle myself into this conversation. Is the real work that we're doing around our own margin, because some of us haven't been as intentional as we should. The reminder that that trickles down into our teams. But here's the thing is we need to be reminded that when we think about this growth for a lot of us as leaders, including me, that maybe we've done some of the work on creating spaces and healthy rhythms and margin, but just because for some of us, because we haven't been as intentional as maybe we should in some of those practices, sometimes that doesn't flow down into our teams like we want it to be, right? So I know for even for myself, is if I'm not careful of not just like setting the pace, but also setting the expectations verbally, that I just can't think that it's just going to get caught by other people. So when we think about, and here's really the shift for us as leaders is that margin has to be built into the culture. It needs to have names to it. It needs to be created rhythms around it, and it needs to be protected, not just demonstrated by us as leaders. Yes, we need to demonstrate it, but we need to go beyond demonstration. That we actually need to begin to actually take intentional steps with the teams we're leading, with the leaders that are under us, to not just say, hey, not only do you need to watch me in doing this, but I actually want to name some of these things and actually create some intentionality around it. So 3 things that we want to do when it comes to intentional movement of creating margin in our teams, in our culture, in our ministries. Yes, we need to model it. We've been talking about that over the next couple of weeks, but here's what I want to say. Number 1 is that we need to name it out loud, right? We need to name it out loud. We need to create actual conversations with our leaders around how we are creating margin and how we want them to take on a similar rhythm. So we need to actually name it out loud. You need to have conversations with your leaders and name explicitly the practice of building in margin and identifying space and healthiness in our leadership and in our ministry. We need to name those things out loud. So that's the first thing that we need to recognize. Yes, we need to model it, but we also need to name it out loud. Number 2 is that we need to build in healthy rhythms. And so what I would say is that there are, and we'll talk about this even a little bit on Wednesday, is what does it look like to create healthy rhythms in our leadership and in our ministry around what we're doing each week, what we're doing each month, what we're doing each quarter. And some of that is rhythms with our family. Some of that is rhythms in the office. Some of that is rhythms with our spouse or wife or husband. Like, we need to build in some of those rhythms. Here's what I would say is just kind of a quick story off of this. This is something that I've learned after 27 years, almost 27 years. In August here, it'll be 27 years of being married. This is one thing that I've learned about my wife, is that she needs built-in healthy rhythms that she can look forward to as my wife. So we're, there's definitely busy seasons, right? So either I'm in Africa or, we're in a stretch of like I'm in a lot of travel, or our team's doing a lot of things. So there are seasons of busyness where we're building and things are going pretty fast. We're developing a lot of content. We're out on the road. We're doing these events. One of the things I've recognized is over this 27 years, almost 27 years of being married, is that we can get through those if there's things that she can look forward to at the end. And sometimes that's hey, I'm going to take a day off in the office. Sometimes that's, hey, we're going to go to San Antonio for the weekend. Sometimes like, hey, you and I are going to get away for 3, 4, 5 days, kind of in this block right here where I don't have a whole lot. And so how do you like build some of those actually healthy rhythms and talk about some of those healthy rhythms with our leaders, and even begin to press in how are they building in healthy rhythms, right? So we need to build in those healthy rhythms. We need to talk about those healthy rhythms. We need to put that call, that challenge in front of the leaders that we're leading to build in those healthy rhythms as well. So we need to name it out loud that this is something that we need to keep in front of us. We need to build healthy rhythms and talk about how we build healthy rhythms as leaders. And then here's the third part of our framework today is protecting it. We need to protect it. We need to protect it. When it costs us, the challenge with creating space, boundaries, margin is here's what I say about ministry. Okay. Ministry is the unending list that never ends, right? There's always better you can do on your message. There's always more opportunities to meet with leaders. There's always more students, but that's not healthy. We have a limited finite amount of time. And so how do we make sure that we are protecting those things and willing to put guardrails and boundaries? And that's the ability to say no. I think about how many times I get invitations to do certain things, to be in certain spaces, to speak at certain events. And I've had to create like boundaries that is going to protect and be willing to say no, and to be willing to make sure that I'm guarding that. So are we protecting even when it costs us something? It could cost us a great opportunity. It could cost us more ministry fruit, but the challenge is going to be, there's always going to be those opportunities. There's always going to be more that we can do. There's always going to be more events. There's always going to be more meetings. And so how do we protect those even when it costs us something? And I'll go back to the building rhythms. One is that we have to be able to say no to the people who are under us, right? Maybe a associate who needs something more, like, hey, I'm not going to be in the office today, or I'm taking my wife out on a date tonight, or I'm gone for a couple of days, so I can't do this thing. And so are we also allowing our leaders that we're leading under us to say no as well, and to create those spaces? So 3 things when we think about the intentionality of not just modeling it, but drilling it down into our leaders. Are we naming it out loud that we have to create spaces, healthy rhythms, margin? Are we building it intentionally into our lives and pushing that into our leaders and challenging them to build it into the rhythm of their ministries, their lives? And then are we willing to say no, and are we willing to protect it? And I think that if we can create some of these spaces and rhythms and create this kind of culture within our leadership and our ministry, I think it can become a very fruitful thing. And we can see God continue to utilize and honor that posture of healthiness and creating some of that space. So when you think about these 3 moves, right, in your marriage and your ministry, we need to name it. We need to create rhythms around it. We need to protect it. And teams, when we think about our teams and our leaders around us, we need to help them begin to do some of those things. And as I kind of think about this today, is like, if margin in our leadership can only be held together because we're like powering our way through it, right? We're gritting our teeth, we're forcing it. Here's the thing, it's not going to last, right? It's not going to last for us as leaders. It's not going to last in our ministries. The teams that can actually create rest, can create margin, can create healthy rhythms are the ones who know that they aren't trying to earn something by resting. They know they're already loved, right? They're already accepted. And so rest flows out of that. It's not a technique, right? It's not a hack. It's the way that we've been designed as people. And you look through the scriptures of the rhythms of rest and how we need to create some of those spaces, and how the Lord called his people to create those healthy rhythms of rest, of years or festivals or days or different things like that. Like, those are some of the things that we see consistently within the scriptures. And so here's the question for us that I want to sit with this week is, what's the one, as you begin to think about this idea of rest and rhythm, like um what do you need to do with the leaders below you, right? Is it you need to verbalize it more? Is it you need to help them create rhythms, or you need to create spaces and show them what it looks like for them to stop? So I know for us, as we think about leaders in this season, or things are a little bit slower, I think it's important for us to be intentional, right? It's important for us to think strategically about how we're going to continue to build these seasons. We're getting close. I've been talking to a lot of leaders. They're getting close to jumping into ministry, and students coming back, and ministry kicking off, and welcome weeks and move-ins and all these things that are happening. But how do we know that? How do we create culture around this versus just like a nice idea, right, that we can act on? So I'd love for you to just kind of sit with that this week. What do you need to do? How do you need to help your team take another step forward in this? Okay. Yeah, something to think about for us this week as leaders. Appreciate you all. Excited to see what God is doing. Excited to be walking this journey with you. If there's something that our team can be doing for you, we'd encourage you to reach out. Let us know. We'll next week we are. I think we're maybe on next week. I'm trying to remember. I think we got an event next week in Oklahoma, and the next week in North Carolina. So it might be a couple weeks that we are away, but we're looking forward to continue to jump on as we set just some of our expectations and think about Monday moving in with intentionality. Okay. We'll see you later.